Are your kitchen and bathroom way overdue for a remodel? Well, I got the guy for you. Call John Sellers at First Response Contracting, 484-256-7136. Both residential and commercial services, and he's licensed and insured. Call him at 484-256-7136. First Response Contracting.
From real estate to real life and everything in between. The Brad Weisman Show. And now, your host, Brad Weisman.
All right, we are back in the studio, and I have to say, this is going to be a little bit more of a heavier show. We're going to be delving into some difficult conversations here. We're going to be talking about suicide, mental health, all these different kinds of things. So if it's something that you don't want to hear, maybe you want to turn it off now instead of listening to the whole thing. But otherwise, if you have anything that you want to hear about those topics, you would want to listen because this is going to be a good show. I'm going to start off the show with some statistics that are very alarming when I read them, and then we'll bring on our guest. As of 2020, suicide is the second leading cause of death for U.S. children ages 10 to 14. That blew me away. That just doesn't seem like it should happen, and it's just incredible. In 2021, 51.7% of U.S. women received mental health services, while only 40% of men received mental health services. We have mental health issues in this country. We have them all over the world. And I wanted to talk about them right here in this community. And I thought the best person to talk to would be Wendy Seidel. She's the executive director of the Greater Reading Mental Health Alliance. And I wanted to say hello. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing really well. Thanks for bringing the toy. She brought me a toy. Hugo, she brought me a toy.
Oh, nice.
Isn't that nice? A little sunshine.
Look at that.
You know, everybody needs a little sunshine in their life, right?
That's right. That's right. And that happens to be our logo as well. So.
I know. And I was around when that became the logo, actually.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I was on the board. It's been a while now, probably 10, 12, 15 years. I don't know what it is, but I was on the board a long time ago. And I was on because I'm a consumer. I actually have been medicated since 32 years old for panic attacks and anxiety. And thank God for the medication Zoloft. I can get through life. I can do a podcast. I can sell real estate. I can do all these things because of that medication. So I'm very thankful. And I'm also thankful that you're here today. And I wanted to go through some of the things. And one of the first things I want to talk about is the stigma. You know, one of the things when I was on the board, one of the things that we were always talking about was how can we get the public or the community or the world to be able to say the word mental health or I have mental health issues without it being any different than saying I have high blood pressure, I have diabetes.
Right. Well, and that's a great point, Brad. And I mean, you know, the first step, I think, is what you just did. You just admitted you're a mental health consumer. And you have been.
Absolutely.
And here you are doing a podcast, selling real estate, living your life, living your best life, right? And I, too, am a consumer. I've had an anxiety disorder probably since I was born. I was officially diagnosed when I was an adolescent. Missed 2 years of school out of it.
Wow. Agoraphobic?
I was agoraphobic. Yeah.
Wow.
And, didn't really know what was going on. A lot of my anxiety manifested itself in physical symptoms. So I was going through all sorts of physical tests as a kid because my parents were just, desperate to try to figure out what's wrong with, my child. And, was thankful enough to eventually be referred to a psychologist who figured out that I had this anxiety disorder. And once I started medication and therapy, which I did for decades on and off, changed my life, because now anxiety doesn't control me, right? Mm-hmm. And that's how it used to be. So I think when you're talking about stigma, you're definitely talking about being able to do that. Yeah. It takes more people in our community to be willing to say, yep, got an anxiety disorder, or struggle with depression, or bipolar disorder, or, I'm schizophrenic, but I'm medicated. Yeah. And I think that's certainly the beginning.
I agree.
Is talking about it.
And I think the stars are doing that more. People in public are starting to do that.
Absolutely.
And I think years ago they didn't do that. And now you're seeing that they'll come out and say that they have depression, or they have anxiety, or they have, and you're sitting there looking at a person that you're like, holy mackerel, how does this person who made this movie and does all this is suffering from anxiety? And I think people they think that those people are perfect. They're not. We all have certain things that we're dealing with. So, so the stigma, but do you feel it is getting better then?
I think stigma is certainly getting better than it was, for sure. When you were talking about the statistics, there's slightly more women that are in therapy than there are men. I think,
I said that's because men drive you crazy. That's what I said before we started the podcast.
Well, part of that is true. I do think that there's still that stigma around men. They need to be strong. They can't cry. We're not going to go sit in front of. Let's face it, most helping professions, whether it's social workers or psychologists, therapists of whatever discipline, are generally female. I think sometimes that's a struggle for a man to be willing to sit down and say, listen, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I can't sleep. I don't eat. I can't have a relationship with people. I'm crying all the time.
Yeah,
so
it's hard to admit that.
It's hard to admit
that.
It's hard to admit it. Sure it is. But I do think stigma, as far as awareness around mental health, is certainly getting better. Not only in Berks County, but I do think, in our nation, because it's kind of getting to a critical point.
And that saves lives.
It saves lives.
It saves lives because before, obviously we still have too much suicide going on, especially in that 10 to 14 age group. And you had a statistic on that too. I don't know if it was kind of something in that line.
In 2022, 50,000 people in the United States died by suicide, which is one person every 11 minutes.
That's incredible.
It's terrible.
And I can't say it's 100% preventable, but there's got to be a lot of percent. There's a lot we can do to not have that.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
And talking about it is a start.
Yeah.
It has to be put out there that there are people who will help you.
Yeah.
Navigating the mental health system is certainly difficult. It's an underfunded system. Yeah. Like many helping professions are. The government just doesn't fund mental health as well as it should. So there are waiting lists to get into therapy offices.
I know
there are high copays.
Absolutely. I know when I was going through my bout, and I got diagnosed at a very older age, at around 31 was when I had my first major panic attack, and it was actually in this building. Upstairs. I'll never forget. Yeah. And it took a long time for me to see. Well, it took a long time for them to diagnose it. I was in the hospital 11 times in 2 weeks via ambulance 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
Thought I was dying. All this stuff was just a mess. And it took a long time until I could actually see a psychiatrist in order to prescribe some type of medicine.
Yeah.
Because, your family doctor is really, and this is not busting on primary care doctors at all.
Not at all.
But it's not. And I love my primary care doctor. He's great. But the thing is that's not their specialty.
That's right. That's right. And getting in to see a psychiatrist
took me 6 or 7 weeks.
Not surprising at all. And I would say that the wait list for that could be even longer now, especially for kids. Unfortunately, there just are not enough prescribers who are able to prescribe medication for children.
And that's a major, to me, is a hurdle or an issue, because I know with my own situation, if I wouldn't have gotten help soon in that period, it could have been a different outcome.
Sure.
And too, you went through this.
Oh, absolutely.
You get to a point where you're like, okay, this is not getting better. I don't know what to do. I can't get help. And now you're like, what do I do? How do I get out of this? How do I escape this? And that's where we end up in bad situations. So that, to me, is something I think as a nation, we need to work on that. We need to work on getting more psychiatrists, more therapists, all those things in order to, you got to shorten that time. When somebody realizes they're sick and they're in bad shape, because a lot of times, by the time you get to that point, you've already dealt with it for 4 or 5 weeks or 6 weeks or 3 months.
Absolutely.
And now you decide and you admit you need help. And now they tell you it's going to be another 2-3 months.
Right.
That's a problem.
Yeah. And that can be a turning point for some people.
Absolutely.
That might be where they decide, look,
self-medicate.
I can't do this. I'll self-medicate. Drinking drugs.
Yep.
Or worse, they decide that, a very permanent solution to a temporary problem, is the answer. And, we need insurance reform, I think, as well. People shouldn't have to pay or shouldn't have to make a decision about paying a copay versus feeding their family. So there's a lot that needs to be done to make that system work a little better. And I think you need to properly compensate the people who are doing that job too. I mean, if you think about sitting down and your day from 8 to 5 is basically listening to stories. about the worst parts of people's lives, the most painful parts of people's lives.
They need therapy after that.
Right. There is something called vicarious trauma, and that's something to deal with.
Oh, wow.
A whole other topic. But that's what happens sometimes to therapists. They get burnt out and then they don't stay. And now you're changing therapists and you're telling your story all over again, which is another frustration for mental health consumers. So,
that's amazing.
We need to make sure that we're paying the people who do this work appropriately as well.
Yeah, it's incredible. And so, well, let's go into some other things you guys are doing over there at the mental health lines. So the other thing too is who can use your services? I mean, that's something I think we got to get out right away, because if you listen to this show, I think people need to know, how do I get help from you guys? What can we do?
Okay, so we provide a couple different services, and they're basically available to anybody in Berks County. Probably one of the biggest ones that anyone can avail themselves of is just to make a phone call to us for advocacy services. So sometimes it is that question of, I don't know where I can go for therapy, or, I don't know how to fill out this medical assistance application.
Oh, wow.
Where can I go for support? Are there support groups? Sometimes people just, don't know those answers. And so they can give us a call. They can email us at info@grmha.org.
Okay.
Or they can call our main number.
And we'll have that information obviously on our socials and stuff like that. We'll make sure all that's in there.
Yeah.
So but it's open. So anybody can call you guys and say, all right, I don't know where to go.
I don't know where to go or what to do with this.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And we'll help you out the best that we're able to.
What if I know if somebody's having an issue?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Are you tired of looking at your car covered in road salt and winter grime, or not quite getting the results you would like to see from the car wash? Well, I've got just the solution for you. The Detail Shop, your go-to destination for premium auto detailing.
We've had some of those phone calls. I mean, you can
say, hey, so-and-so, my brother, my mother, my father, how can I get them help? That kind of a conversation.
Absolutely. You can certainly call us and we can talk through that with you. Every situation is different. Yeah. So I can't give one blanket answer as to how to fix a situation, but we'll certainly talk with you about that. And,
awesome.
Maybe we can reach out to that individual and see if they'd be willing to talk to us. Yeah. Sometimes it just takes, a phone call from somebody who wants to hear.
Yeah, it's so true. On. So true. Knowing somebody cares, right?
That's right.
So then let's go through some of the things you guys do. You do the education advocacy, which I didn't even realize I was on the board before. And I don't know if we did it at that time, but it wasn't a big topic. But you actually help parents advocate for if a child needs special help or is a special needs type situation. It's called free appropriate public education. You can point them in the right direction or make sure that the child is getting what they need from the public school system.
That's right. So we have 3 educational advocates who all have lived experience. All 3 of them have children who have some type of special need.
That's good.
And they have worked through the special education system with their own children and have worked for our office for many, many years. They are extremely well-versed in the special education system. They have wonderful relationships with all the school districts in Berks County. And they will work with you if your child needs an individual education plan, an IEP. There are just situations where kids need some physical therapy or occupational therapy in school, and they'll work with parents on how to advocate for those services if those children aren't getting them. And I don't want that to sound like they're adversarial. They're not there to say that the school is bad.
No.
I think that's why they've developed such a good relationship with the school districts. They will, explain to parents, the special education system and the law is very complicated.
Yeah.
I've been at the organization now about 5 years, and I still don't know all the acronyms and what's available and what's out there. So these ladies are miracle workers when it comes to special ed. So shout out to them. But they will work with families and their kids and teach them how to advocate. And the goal of that service really is to eventually be able to set parents free. We want them to be able to advocate. We want everybody to be their own advocate.
Of course.
That's the goal for anything. So that's a wonderful.
There's a sense of pride there with that too.
That's right.
You're the parent. You want to know that you're doing the right things. But as a parent, you might need help in the beginning.
That's right.
There's nothing wrong with that. Once again,
nothing wrong
the stigma. Get rid of the stigma.
That's right.
Get in and just get the help. Right.
You got it.
But that's really cool that you do that. Like I said, I didn't know that you guys did that. The Consumer Family Satisfaction Team. This is cool. You guys do surveys for county residents on community care behavior behavioral health. Like you do these surveys that go out to like, what, 300, 400 people or something like that? Or?
Yeah, the goal is to do 300 a year. So Community Care Behavioral Health is the organization that manages medical assistance in Berks County. And as part of that service, they want to make sure that their members are getting quality services at whatever providers they're going to. So we have one full-time and one part-time staff member who basically go out into the community. They'll go to different therapy offices like Family Guidance Center or Berks Counseling Center, and they'll do surveys in person. They also will send out email surveys for people who prefer that through SurveyMonkey. And the surveys have some state guided questions. So there's certain information that gets reported to the state anonymously, of course. Yeah. Your information is never on that. But that helps the state and it helps our county know whether or not providers are providing quality care for their members.
If they're not, you got to change it.
Needs to change.
It's accountability.
Sure.
It's accountability. And that's the public's money being used.
That's
so
right.
the public should know that it's being used correctly.
Indeed.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Right. That's awesome. Yeah. I like hearing that you guys do that. And then peer support is another one I know you guys do. It's for individuals in recovery. The individuals in recovery are able to offer insight into the recovery process. I think that's amazing. So it's somebody that has walked that behavior.
Right.
Has been in those shoes, is now helping somebody that's trying to that needs help.
That's right. So they're called certified peer specialists. They actually go through a training and a certification process. And then what they do is, we match them to people in the community who've been referred for that service. That's the only service that we provide at our organization that is funded by medical assistance.
Okay.
And it's the only real direct mental health service that we'll provide.
Gotcha.
So if someone is referred to us for peer support, they generally need the referral form and they need a recommendation, which is signed off on by a practitioner of the healing arts, which is, a social worker, a therapist, a counselor, psychologist, things of that nature. And then we get them authorized through medical assistance to provide the service, and we match them with one of our certified peer specialists. And they can spend up to 4 hours a day with someone. They'll help them develop an individual recovery plan, which kind of outlines what goals and tasks that person wants to work on. And that can be as basic as my anxiety is so bad I can't leave my couch.
Yeah.
So I want to be able to take a walk around the block. So our certified peer specialist will work with them on what coping skills can we use to get you outside today. And we'll stand outside for 5 minutes and talk, and now we'll go back in and process how that went. And they'll work with them over the course of months, maybe a year, to get them to finally take that walk around the block. Or it can be goals that are much more, higher level goals that maybe somebody wants to finally get out into the workforce. And they just need that support from someone who's been there, who's walked in those shoes, bright red sneakers, maybe, as the case may be.
Hopefully bright red sneakers, yes.
So it's just somebody who's been there and done that, right? Like,
Isn't it amazing how we can take advice, we can take guidance so much better from somebody that's been through it, obviously.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Unless you're an adolescent.
Unless you're an adolescent, then they don't want to. That's true. Parents know nothing, just so you know. Right. Parents know nothing. That's so true. Yeah, adolescents forget that. But they'll take it from another adolescent, probably.
From another adolescent, of
just
course
not from their parents. That's right.
That's right.
Unbelievable. That's really cool, and I think that's a good one. And then as far as otherwise, you do support groups. And I know I actually, when I was there, I had an anxiety panic attack support group. And it was tough. It was really interesting because I remember telling my parents this, and this is, back when I was 34, 35, whatever it was. And I was so excited to get this support group started through the mental health lines. And the problem was a lot of the people wouldn't show because they would get anxiety before they would come.
No, they would get that right.
I'm serious. I would get phone calls. They're like, I can't do it today. I'm like, I get it. And there was a person actually was in the support group that was on speakerphone. She was agoraphobic at the time.
Just couldn't leave the house.
And couldn't leave the house. So, she, we would talk to her through there, and I got it. I totally was in it. But it was interesting. I'm thinking, okay, great. Here's a support group for people that they have anxiety and they can't make it in because they're anxious about it. So it was interesting. But that just shows you how difficult it can be for people.
Oh, absolutely.
It can be really difficult.
It is.
And then you do the one I saw on infant loss, which is never even thought of that. A support group for somebody that's lost an infant. Yeah,
an infant or a child or a pregnancy. We help support the Adel and Rose Foundation. There's a bunch of organizations in our community. One of the things we pride ourselves on is that we really want to fill gaps in services in our Berks County community. And if our office can do something to support a support group, that thereby fills a need, that's what we're doing. So we have infant loss groups. We have a grief group that meets at Clearwater Wellness. And we're going to talk about this a little later. We have a survivors of suicide group that meets there as well. And a lot of times we'll get calls from people who want to know, do you have this kind of support group or can you find one?
Yeah.
And my response is always, if I can't find it, I'll create it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what the motto has been for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
If it exists, we'll find it. If we can't find it, we'll create it.
Yeah. And I think that is super important to support groups. I just know from my own situation, I'll never forget a big breakthrough for me in feeling better was not just being medicated, but was seeing a good friend of mine at the grocery store. Of course, when I saw her, I was like, I just wanted to leave because I was still in that situation where I didn't want to be in the grocery store. Yeah. I was just like, all right, I got to get in. I hope I don't see anybody. I want to get out. But normally I'm a very I just want to see people, Right. So I go in there, she starts talking to me. She starts telling me how her brother has the same thing. And I'll never forget this. I remember feeling this ease or this feeling of comfort, knowing that there was nothing wrong with me.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? It was that feeling of, hey, there's nothing wrong with me. Her brother has this. He's going through the same thing. So this is not something that's unique to me. And that's what's great about the support groups.
Absolutely.
You realize that, was it misery loves company, right? For some reason, there's comfort in that, knowing that, oh, you have that too. Okay. Well, this is how is yours? Does yours manifest this way? Does it manifest that way? So that to me is probably one of the most important things. That's how I found you guys. That's how I found you when I was going through a difficult time, was because of the support group thing. I was looking for help. I was looking for somebody to talk to,
Absolutely.
So that's awesome. And you also, the one that I really stood out to me before we end the podcast here, I want to talk about the lost team. The lost team outreach to suicide survivors. It's an important one because unfortunately we have this high rate of suicide. There's people left behind when there's a suicide. That person, unfortunately, took care of their pain, their hurt, but they are leaving behind pain and hurt. So tell me about that, what you guys are doing with that.
Sure. So LOSS stands for Local Outreach to Suicide Survivors, and it was a concept that was started by Dr. Frank Campbell from Louisiana. He was working in a crisis center and also part-time as a coroner in one of the local parishes. And what he started seeing was a lot of people coming into this crisis center who they themselves were in a crisis, and it revolved around the fact that they had lost someone to suicide years prior and never got any sort of help.
Interesting.
And so what he did was he found some individuals who were far enough along in their grief journey, similar to peer support, that they could be a benefit to people who are just going through it. And he started this postvention model. And what they basically do is they have trained individuals who are either compassionately trained, which means that they have not themselves experienced a loss to suicide, or ideally we have volunteers who have lost someone to suicide. So when I and my colleague went through this training, we basically looked at one another and said, why don't we have this in Berks County?
Yeah.
I mean, we have this suicide prevention task force and Are You Okay, Berks? And everything like that is wonderful, but we need this in Berks. So we started this program. We currently have 2 volunteers, both of whom have lost someone. And people can self-refer to our office. We get referrals from police departments, from the coroner's office. And we basically just need some very brief information on a referral form that's on our website. And we'll have links to that for this podcast too. And we'll reach out to you. One of our volunteers will reach out with you and talk to you about their experience. And they can point you in some directions for help in our county. The Survivors of Suicide group meets twice a month at Clearwater Wellness. It is a totally free group.
Yeah.
Our office assumes that cost because we feel that
that's a good one.
That person has paid a big enough price to have lost someone.
And what's amazing is that person doesn't necessarily have mental health until after that happens.
Sure.
Doesn't have a mental health issue or a mental health situation at all. It's just incredible. Then the person does that. Now that they're not here, but that person now lives with this.
Yeah, it's a very, very complicated grief process. It's different than losing someone to a natural cause,
absolutely,
or an accident. The way we were
explain
talking about
real quick about the grocery store.
Sure.
I brought up the grocery store.
So,
this was something I didn't know or didn't think about. So I like this story.
So this is what makes loss to suicide a more complicated grief process. So if I lose my father to dementia, old age, he passes away, and I turn the corner in the grocery store and you're coming down that aisle and you see me, you might have a moment where you're a little bit uncomfortable because you think, oh man, I haven't seen Wendy since her dad died.
Right.
But most times you're going to come up to me and say, oh my gosh, Wendy, I heard about your dad. I'm so sorry. Is there anything you need? It's good to see you.
Yeah. Sorry for your loss.
Right. Sorry
the whole
for your
thing.
loss. Your typical
how are you doing? Do you need anything?
Right. Exactly. Now flip that around a little bit and you find out that my 15-year-old son died by suicide. Now I come around the corner and you come around the corner and you've been hearing the other parents at the PTO and you've been hearing people at the soccer game saying, hey, did you hear that this happened? Did you hear this happened? You're going to be more inclined, and all of us are, it's human nature.
Absolutely.
To feel so uncomfortable that you're going to turn around. And you're not going to interact with me. You're
Which is not
hope
fair.
That I didn't see you coming, right?
Yep.
And that makes that loss so much more difficult. People lose their natural support systems. We were talking a little bit, people who are very involved in their church. Unfortunately, some churches still see suicide as a sin. And those people might not be accepted back by their congregation. I would hope in 2024 we're not at that place.
I hope we're at a better place now.
I really would. But, it's just very different. People don't know what to say. And
I agree. You just like you said, I didn't realize that or think about that until you made that analogy of the two different ways of somebody passing. You're just not. You're going to avoid the situation because it's uncomfortable. You don't know what to say. You don't know how to comfort them. You think, okay, I don't want to bring it up, because it's different. It's a different way of losing somebody.
It is. It's
and what's amazing is they're losing their support then because people are avoiding them. It's worse.
Right. When someone passes away of old age or in an accident, your neighbors are bringing you meals and maybe someone starts a GoFundMe for you to help you pay for the costs of things. But when someone dies by suicide,
they just
people are like, ugh. It's an uncomfortable place to be.
It is totally.
But what you just really need to remember is that person's grieving.
Just like everybody else.
Just like anybody else.
Exactly. It's just a different way of doing it. I'll tell you what. Thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it. Deep conversation, good conversation. It's a conversation that needs to keep happening, too.
It has to happen.
Has to keep happening. And I can see you coming back in here again. You did your first podcast. Did you like it?
First podcast.
It's not bad, right?
It's not bad. It's not bad at all. Anybody who want to do it, please come on in. And
it's better than a cold water plunge. I'll tell you that.
Agreed. If I can leave you with one thing, it's something I saw on a Facebook reel. I'm not a huge social media fan, but listen, what I've found is that it only takes 8 minutes to sit in the space with someone to make them feel better.
Wow,
so
8 minutes is nothing.
If you want to be a real friend, right?
Good one.
Have a code word. You have 8 minutes.
That's cool. That's very cool. 8 minutes is not a lot of time.
It's not a lot of time.
Not to save somebody's life, right?
That's for sure.
Amazing. Unbelievable. All right. Boy, what a great show. There you have it. That was the executive director, Wendy Seidel, of the Greater Reading Mental Health Alliance. If you are having any type of mental health issues or you know of somebody, please look them up. They have all kinds of services to help you. They can definitely put you in the right direction, and believe me, it'll be worth your time. That's about it. Thanks for seeing us here every Thursday at 7 p.m. We will be here again next week. See us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and anywhere else you see podcasts. All right. Thank you. Are your kitchen and bathroom remodels a little overdue? Well, now's your chance to call First Response Contracting. John Sellers will take care of you. 484-256-7136. They do residential and commercial, and they're licensed and insured. Give them a call at 484-256-7136.